Now, let's say if you have the textures on your object here, and so I put the materials on here. Now, how are we going to light this? And once again, we're not seeing the textures in the viewport. I want to go to shading and make sure I uncheck use default materials. You can see that I'm going to just delete this right now. Might not show up well in the viewport, okay, or make any sense. I don't really care about that. I don't really care what it looks like in the viewport. I only care about what it looks like in the render. So, assuming that I have all materials set up properly, let's talk about how to light this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Arnold. The first thing I'm going to do is go to Arnold Lights, Skydome Light. Okay, this is going to be my basic starting point of anything, and what it did is it put a dome around the entire object, and that's going to be kind of my initial lighting. I also want to see where my render view is. So if I go to Render Settings, and this is my render settings that pop up, I'm going to say, if I look down here, I'm going to put my image size. I'm going to put this to HD 1080. And if I wanted smaller render size, I could make it smaller, like HD 540. And what that is basically how many pixels. I can see it's 540 pixels by 960 pixels. 1080 is 1080 pixels by 1920 pixels. And why I like this is a letterbox. In other words, a rectangle image, similar to like a TV. And I feel like a lot of the images on ArtStation or something like that, it looks nice in this resolution. Or I should say this aspect ratio. So now to see that, because you can see our image still looks square here, in the viewport, if I click on this icon right here under Show, this icon, now I can see the resolution gate. So you can see that if I switch it to a square, I can see that. You'll notice that on, like when I switch to square, how it doesn't, I don't see the whole thing. So what I can do is I can go to View, Camera Settings, and then I could say like vertical or fill. So if I go like that, now I can see the entire resolution gate. So if you don't see the entire resolution gate, you want to go to View, Camera Settings, and then play with these different ones here until you see your entire resolution gate. Now I'm going to switch this back to HD 1080, and there I can see the whole resolution gate. That's important because even if I had the T-Rex like this, even though his head is still in the viewport, it would not render because it's not in the viewport. Okay, great. So let's start lighting this guy. So once again, I have the materials on here. This Skydome light that I put in here is the only light in the scene right now. So if I render this out, and the way that I'm going to render it is I'm going to go to Arnold, open Arnold Render View, and then I'm going to hit the play button right here. And the first time I hit that, it might take a little bit of time. It's going to kind of like look at the textures and kind of see what it's got going on. But then once it's there, once we see it, it's going to go a lot faster. So I think what I'll do is I'll pause the video for a second, let it catch up, and then it'll be a lot faster. Okay, that took a few minutes. Depending on your computer, it might be faster or slower. And I can see that this is actually pretty big. Now, what I can do is I can go in here and I can say 3D manipulation. And now I should be able to rotate in the viewport. Okay, and if you can't, then you can just go here and rotate your camera. But I feel like it's kind of cool to be able to rotate in the viewport. And you can see that it almost kind of stays in real time. Not quite real time, just because it kind of has to process. This does have a displacement map on, and some complexities, which is pretty cool. But if I just left it like this, and this was my render, I feel like it feels very flat, really not showing off what I have here. So I'm going to add some additional lighting in here. And once again, this dome is a light. And if I want to match my lighting from Substance Painter, I'm going to go into Color, And I'm going to go find the file. And here it is, panorama. And this is the image from Substance Painter. And in the texturing one, I show how to export that image. You just right-click on the image in Substance Painter and tell it where to save to. I told it to save here, so I'll open that up. And that's going to affect the lighting on this guy. Okay, well, I can see that already significant lighting change, and I can start to see stuff going on here. Now, I can rotate this image. Okay, so this globe here, if I select it and click on my rotation, I'm just going to kind of move this up like this. I can rotate this, and it's going to update the lighting on him. Okay, and I can see that it's significantly changing the lighting. Okay, you might be saying, well, why is it dark? Why is it light? And what we have to ask ourselves, or what we have to look at, is this. If I go to panel perspective, I'm just going to go to look at it through another camera angle. I'm going to stop this for a second. So if I go to panels perspective, looks like I'm looking through perspective 1, so I'm just going to go to this perspective. What we have to think about is not what's on this side of the image, but what's on this side of the image. So if I rotate my lighting, I have to kind of think about what's on this side of the image, and I can see that this really bright area on the image is going to really be illuminating the T-Rex, whereas if I went like this, and this is kind of a darker region, it's not going to be as bright there. So I feel like it's kind of weird because you can't really see that when you're rotating it. So I just kind of like rotate it and kind of see what feels nice. And I'm kind of liking this. I feel like I like how it's picking up the wrinkles there. I think that's pretty cool. I'm going to go back to perspective 1 because that's a camera that I was rendering from. And it doesn't matter. You could be rendering from perspective. That's fine. So now that I have that, I don't want to see this background image. Okay, I feel like that we're just using that for lighting purposes only. So to get rid of this, I'm going to select the image dome so I can go to the outliner. If you don't see the outliner, you go to Window, Outliner. I'm going to select this Skydome, and then over here I'm going to go down, and under Visibility I'm going to put Camera to 0. And by doing that, if I hit play, I can see that the camera goes away. And now normally this would be set to black. So if you want this to be a different color, I would go into my render settings. And in my render settings, if I go down into Arnold Render, go to Environment, you'll see that I have something set on here. And by the way, if you have something set and you don't want it, you can right-click on this title and go to Break Connection. So that's what it would be by default there. And I'll probably come back to the black. I kind of like that. But I'm just going to show you if you want a different color. So if I go to Background, I click here and go to Create Ray Switch Shader. I know that sounds kind of weird, but just go with it. And right here, I can see that camera. I can change this to a gray. And now I can see that that is like that. If you want a different color, I could select on this, and I could choose any color that I want. Okay, I usually like to do kind of like a nice kind of a gray, but in this case, I think I'm going to do a black. Okay, so maybe I'll bring this down to really dark, and I guess I wouldn't even need a ray switch shader on because I feel like normally it would be black. So I think I'm going to just kind of leave it at that. I'm going to go back to my Skydome, and one thing that I can do if I come up here, I could change the intensity. Now I feel like there's this, I feel like everybody says, no, you should adjust the exposure, and that's probably true, but for whatever reason, I like to change the intensity. So I'm going to go here, and if I put intensity to 2, I can see that it's going to be twice as bright. And I could keep going with that, but I'm going to go ahead and just leave it at 1. I kind of like this, okay? I don't want this light to feel like it's my main source of light. I want my light actually coming down from this angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a another light in the scene. I'm going to just stop this. You might be saying, well, why am I stopping it? Well, if I leave this running, there is a potential for it to crash. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause it for a second or stop it. And now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go to Create, Lights, Spotlight. Okay, and now that created a spotlight, and I can see that here's the icon. I just scaled it up. It doesn't matter the size of the icon. And now if I want to position it, here's an easy way. I'm going to go to Panels. As long as that light is selected, I'm going to go to Panels, Look Through Selected. And if you think about it, it's going to look through the light. It's going to look through the object that's selected. So if I click on that, now I'm looking through the light. And if I just move, like moving any other camera, I'm actually moving the light. And this green circle is saying what it will illuminate. So if it was like this, it would just illuminate this area, and these areas would be dark. So I want it to illuminate the whole thing. I'm going to kind of go like that. And now if I step out of this, if I go to just my perspective, now if I zoom out, I can see, yeah, here's the light, and I can make that icon bigger. And maybe I scale this bigger. I just want to make sure that light is inside the dome. And I'll go back to perspective 1. There we go. And now if I want to see what I did, I can come here and hit play to update it. Okay. You might be kind of surprised to say that, well, it looks like it didn't do anything. So if I go to this spotlight, if I click on this spotlight here, now I can go over here in the attribute editor and I could increase its intensity. So from 1, I could go to 10. I still don't see any update. So I'm going to add a 0 in. Okay, 100. Okay, and I think that that's, you know, a lot of times people increase the exposure because they don't have to go so crazy on the numbers, but I'm just going to go like, keep going. And notice I'm at, what, 10,000? Here's 100,000. Maybe 1 million. And then if I go to 10 million, okay, at 10 million, I feel like it starts to get a little bit too bright here. So I think my sweet spot is between 10 million and 1 million. Because if I, once again, if I leave that off, that's not bright enough. So maybe I'll split the difference. Maybe I'll go to, what, 5 million? And I don't want you to memorize the number. The number is going to be based off of how big your object is, how far away your light is from the object. There's a bunch of variables. So just play with it until it looks good. I can also maybe go to color and do a slightly off, off white. I don't want it to be a perfect white. Decay rate, if I put this on, quadratic decay is going to be your most realistic lighting. So that means that it's going to be, the light is actually going to kind of fade over time, the distance from the light. Now, if I select the Skydome, I'm going to put, actually, I want to turn the Skydome off, but I don't want to kind of mess with these numbers. An easy way to do that is to go to Window, Rendering Editors, Light Editor. And if I open up the Light Editor, this is a nice, easy way to stay organized. So what I can do is if I didn't want to see the effect of the Skydome light, I can just click on this Disable button, and now I have only the effect of the spotlight. And now I feel like I can kind of like dial in the spotlight exactly as I want it. So maybe if I click on the spotlight, you can see here that it conveniently gives me intensity and exposure. Basically anything that I would want to affect on this. So maybe I'll put this at 7, whatever that is, 7 million, 7. Maybe I'll try higher. Let's see. Okay, kind of liking that. And the thing is that if I have one light on there, and that's what I have right now, I have that one light, that's my key light, that's my main light, I can see that the shadows go perfectly black. Okay, black shadows are really our enemy with lighting. So I feel like that's where our Skydome comes in. This is going to be our bounced light. So if I unmute this, I can see that this still feels like a shadow down here. Same with inside the mouth. It still feels like it's shadowy, but it's not perfectly black. and that's what I want it to be. So in other words, I do want, I don't want this to be bright enough where it takes away the shadow. I want the shadow to feel like a shadow, but I don't want the shadow to be so dark that it's perfectly black. Okay, that's not natural. It doesn't feel like the light is bouncing around. So, and you can see once again inside the mouth here, all over here. I'm going to turn that on. Now I feel like the light's bouncing around. It still feels like the main light is coming from this way. Okay, and that's what I want. Now I feel like I'm going to add one more light in the background, and that light is going to be our rim light for our three-point lighting, to finish up our three-point lighting. So, and I could rename these lights. So this is going to be our key light. Our Skydome, this is actually going to be our fill light. Okay, because that's its job, is to fill in these areas. And then we're going to have a new one, which is going to be our rim light. So once again, I'm going to stop this render anytime I introduce a new light. And I'm going to go into a different camera. I don't want to disrupt this camera angle. And maybe what I want to do is just go to perspective new, and now I have a new camera. And now I can move this around as much as I want. I'm going to go to create, lights, area light. And now if I scale this light up, now realize that by scaling this size of the icon, it will affect how bright and intense this light is. So most lights, the scaling of the icon does not matter. This is the exception. On this one, the bigger that the icon is, the brighter the light's going to be. Okay, I'm still going to have to adjust the intensity here, but at least we know that. Now, I'm going to see if I can have this update, but yet be in this camera, because I don't want this to, I don't want to render from the view that I have here. So if I hit play, there I can see that it's staying in this view, which is good. But now I can kind of play in this view, okay? Or if I had two monitors, I'd probably set this on the other screen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my other lights, okay? When I'm trying to dial in a light, I don't want the key light on. I also don't want the fill light on. Okay, so you can see it's perfectly black now. And I'm going to see if I can get this area light, which is going to be our rim light. I'm going to go ahead and name it rim light. And now I'm going to play with the intensity of it. So I could play with the intensity here or here. I think it's kind of cleaner if I do it here. So I'm just going to kind of say intensity of 100. Okay, I'm going to bump that up. 10,000. Okay, and sometimes I go just super high to see if it's going to have any effect whatsoever. And it looks like it's not having an effect. I might need to change the angle. Okay, and if I go to, let's see, rim light. Okay, it looks like I was adjusting, perhaps, no? Okay, so it looks like it didn't capture what I was doing, so I'm going to try it again. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. I can start to see an effect here, and you can see that I have these other lights turned off. It's easier for me to see the result of what I'm doing now. Okay, and I can kind of dial in the exact angle and the brightness of it. Okay, so maybe that's getting too bright, but now I'm going to kind of do like this. And the purpose of this light is, I'm going to call this kind of my hero rim light, Hollywood style lighting, is this is going to help show off the form. I can start to see the scales. I can start to see that it's, you know, it's not so flat. Maybe I'll, maybe it's too bright right now, so I'm just going to go in here. No, maybe I'll leave that. And okay, I'm kind of liking that. I like how it's kind of reaching off his back here. I like how it's kind of showing that. I like how it's showing off this, kind of catching some highlights on the teeth. I think that's pretty cool. So now if I come back here and if I turn on the fill light, now I can kind of see those two lights working together, right? So this would be the fill light with just the rim light. And then if I add the key light back on, now I have the, it's totally lit up. I feel like it has the Hollywood style lighting coming back here to kind of show off the form. And maybe on that rim light, I want the color to make it look more like a moonlight. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do a bluish, and that's too saturated. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm just going to kind of bring that down. So just kind of a hint of like, I don't know, maybe like it's a nighttime. And so I'm getting kind of that contrast of the blues and the kind of the warmer lights right here. But that's kind of our core startup of our lighting there. So I can see that if I look at this, if I click 1:1, this is what I want to judge the quality of the render on. Okay, so in other words, if at this point, if the quality was not acceptable, then I would go in and I would go into my render settings, and I would go to the Arnold render tab, and I would adjust these settings up. What do I mean by that? Well, see how this is kind of pixelated? They're only pixelated because it's not done rendering, but if it, let's say if it was done rendering and it still looked bad, then once again I would increase this. If the edges looked really janky and jagged, I would increase my this one here. But realize that the farther you go to the right, the higher these numbers are, the longer the render is going to take, but the better quality it's going to be. If you can find a good balance of it not taking too long and good quality, that's kind of your best, okay, ideal. Now, I want to judge this in 1:1 because if I zoom up on this image, it's always going to get pixelated because it's a raster image, okay? So I feel like I have to be kind of careful on that. But let's say if I'm happy with this, okay, which I like how this is coming out, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and stop this, and I'm going to do a real render, okay? I feel like this is a good, once again, a good starting point. But up here, I'm going to kind of do one of these. I'm going to go ahead and click on this icon, open up my render view, and then I'm going to click on this first render icon right here, and now I'm going to let it render. And it's going to take a lot longer. So I feel like when I'm setting up my lights, I want to be in the real-time Arnold render view. And once I get my lighting established, now I'm going to do a quote-unquote real render and let it process. And I feel like I get a slightly better result here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause the video and let it render. So this render took, looks like 1:28, and I can see that it's from the wrong camera, okay? And if that ever happens, I can just go to render, render, and in this case, I can see down here that this is at perspective 1. So I'm going to just switch this to perspective 1, and then render again. Once again, I'll pause the video and then let that happen. So this render took 3 minutes 19 seconds, and I can see that it's from the correct camera angle. And now I feel like this isn't live anymore. I can't rotate it, but I can zoom in. So once again, I'm going to hit 1:1, and this is going to be 1920 by 1080 pixels. So once again, that's what I want to kind of judge this on. And I can hold down Alt and middle mouse drag to kind of look around my image. And then if I want to zoom in, I can middle mouse wheel in. And eventually it will get pixelated because it's a raster image. So if you're like, well, if you zoom in and say, well, this isn't very good, that's not really a fair judgment of your render, because I think you should judge it at 1:1, the real size. So if, once again, if this is still bad, then I would fix that in your, in your render settings. But, okay, great. This is looking good. So now if I save this image, if I go File, Save Image, the mistake that I think a lot of people make is they just save it. And by default, it's going to save as a raw image right here. And if it saves it as a raw image, what that's going to look like is if I turn this off, so if I turn this off, it's going to save it extra dark, which wasn't our intended lighting. So if I turn this on, this was our intended lighting. So if this is what we want for lighting, then I'm going to go File, Save Image, and I want to make sure that I set Color Managed here. And now if I save this as a JPEG or a PNG, I'll just save this as a PNG. I'm going to call this T-Rex_001. And now I have that saved. And I should probably look at that image to make sure that it's what I intended to be. So if I want to do that, I can go in here and I could go find this. So I'm going to go to the desktop, T-Rex, images, and I was doing a test render. You'll notice that one of these has a black background and one of them has a white background. And I believe the one that I just saved as a PNG has the white background, and that's because it has a potential alpha channel. So even if I open this up, sometimes I guess what I'm saying is that this Explorer window isn't necessarily a true representation of what we're actually getting. So I might want to open it up in Photoshop or something like that to actually see, what I'm truly getting. But if it's a JPEG or something that doesn't support an alpha channel, then we're going to kind of see it like this. So, and if you're not seeing the icon, you can go down here and kind of switch this. So let's say if I'm happy with that, okay, now what I can do is I can change the angle that I want to render this. Now, if I change the angle that I render this, that's going to kind of throw off my lighting. Let's say I like this lighting. I like the lighting coming from behind. I like this lighting coming from this angle. So how am I going to do that? Well, let's take a look here. I'm going to go to open the Arnold render view again. And the reason that I want the Arnold render view is that I can rotate this one. Once again, I have the 3D manipulation, and if I turn this on, it's going to take a little bit of time to establish the first render again. And then once it's established, then I can kind of rotate in real time. So once again, I'll pause the video and let it catch up. Okay, that took a couple minutes to kick in. I can see that it's still not totally done, but I should be able to start rotating it now. Okay. Now, the problem is that if I rotate it, and let's say if I want to show off this side of the character, the problem is that my rim light is too bright, and I would have to kind of readjust my lighting on that side, right? So I want to kind of keep my lighting from this angle, but if I don't want to kind of keep adjusting my lights, I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually select the group of the character, and you can see that I have the group of the character selected, and then I'm going to rotate the character instead of the camera or the lighting. Notice that the lighting is outside of the group, and the only thing in the group is the T-Rex himself. So now, if I rotate the T-Rex, I can see that my lighting is going to be staying constant. Okay, now you can see that it gets outside of the cone zone, right, of the key light. So I could select the key light, and I could just go over here and make the cone angle bigger. Okay, so I didn't really screw up any of my lighting, and if I want to move the camera over a little bit, I could. There we go. And now I have another angle that I could work with. So could you save the image here? Absolutely. But I feel like, once again, if I dial this in exactly as I want, I usually stop this render and then do another, what I call real render up here. I feel like the quality just is slightly better, and we might as well have the highest quality that we can. And then when I'm done with this shot, I would go back here to my Arnold render view, and once again I would rotate the character rather than rotating the camera or the lighting. Okay, leave the lighting alone and then just kind of rotate your angles. So hopefully that was helpful regarding rendering and lighting.